Sony finally released a camera with a flip screen. Well, kinda. I mean, mostly. Is the Sony A6400 the camera we were all hoping Sony would finally release? Let's find out. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. While I'm known for never being able to make up my mind about what cameras I'm going to use personally, the brand that I've used the longest, if you add up all of my indecisions into one coherent timeline, that's Sony. Bottom line of the whole video up front, I really like the A6400. It's impressed me enough that when I send this loaner back, I'm going to buy one of my very own. All of the Sigma lenses, like this one that you see in the next few videos, are lenses that I purchased myself to use with my own A6400. Do I think it's a perfect vlogging camera? No, I actually don't think it's a vlogging camera at all. But I think for some of us, it might be the first really useful YouTuber camera. I used an A6300 for about 6 months in late 2017, and when the A7 III came around, I rocked that for another 6 to 8 months. I say that to say that I think Sony makes good cameras. There's no two ways about it. I mean, they're not perfect cameras again, but some of them get pretty darn close for the online content creator. But before we get too far into the video, however, I'd like to thank my friends over at B&H Photo for lending me this camera for a few weeks to share my thoughts with all of you. If you'd like to get your very own Sony A6400, because I'm telling you, at the end of this is a perfect camera for some people. There will be links in the description below. And second disclaimer, I'm not a photographer, nor am I a professional videographer, so the specs and features we'll be talking about today will be the ones that are most important for the online content creator. And as somebody that's been doing this for over 2 years now, I think I've got a pretty good idea of what us online video shooters need, and I've taken that wisdom, distilled it into 4 categories, and will explain how the A6400 crushes each of them right now. Probably shouldn't have slammed that down so hard. First up, video quality. When you boil what you want a camera to do down to like the basics, it's just you want it to make the image you want and the audio that you've prepared for. So let's quickly touch on the most important video and audio specs. The A6400 has a 24.2 megapixel APS-C size CMOS sensor. It can record in up to 4K 30 frames per second and 1080p at up to 120 frames per second. Plus, it has the same slow and quick menu that the A7 III has, so you can either do that 120 frames per second slow motion in camera, or you could even turn it to like 1 frame per second and do time lapses. Its autofocus system is a hybrid 424 phase and contrast detection points, which combines into what Sony calls the fastest autofocusing system in the world. Plus, and this is more of a body ease of use thing that we'll talk more on later, but I'm too excited to wait, it's got a flip up touch to focus screen that doesn't dim when you record in 4K. Let that sink in, it's amazing. Now, there is a few things that this is missing, and the biggest of those is in-body image stabilization. There's none in here, not even Sony's weak version of IBIS, you know, like what you find on the A6500 and the A7 III. But honestly, the image quality coming out of the A6400 is fantastic. I feel like it's the same color science that released with the A7 III, and for me, that's just about as good as you can get. Now, I know Sony gets a bad rap in the color department, but this works pretty darn well. I pop it into picture profile 1, and that's it. That's it. You don't even need to really mess around with the picture profiles if you don't want to. You can just leave it in the standard and you'll get good image. With every other camera I use, whether it be my X-T3, GH5, or Z6, they each look great, but you have to tweak the settings to get it there. All you do right here is scroll, PP1, that's it, you're done. And you know what? Let's switch out cameras really quick, so the rest of the video will be shot on the A6400. There we go. Now we're on the A6400. And let me say, the first thing you probably notice is the autofocusing system is also pretty darn good. And we'll talk more about this later, but what makes it so good, in my opinion, is with the flip-up screen, you don't need a monitor, because for some reason, when using a monitor with these Sony cameras, including the A6400, you lose face tracking autofocus in 4K. So being able to not need a monitor and keep the face tracking autofocus is a huge win for the A6400. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. The rolling shutter on this camera is terrible. legitimately bad. Now, I don't normally bring up rolling shutter because honestly, it's never really that big of a deal for me, but here it's so noticeable. If you don't know what rolling shutter is, incredibly abbreviated explanation alert. Most cameras take a certain amount of time for the camera to fully read what the sensor sees. The slower it reads, the more movement can have an effect on the video. Sony APS-C cameras generally have pretty slow read speeds, especially when they're in 4K. So when you pan the camera, you'll see some warping. This also means that fast-moving objects will also warp. Is this a deal breaker? For me, no, but for some of you, it very well might be, because it's terrible. But don't take my word for it, let's hop outside real quick for a video/vlogging test. Welcome to the vlogging test of the Sony A6400. Man, look how small this thing is. Like, I haven't used a Sony APS-C body in a hot minute, and I'm very excited to try this one out. And it's also got the most adorable little, can you see that? It's got the most adorable little ND filter ever. Like, it's the cutest ND filter I've ever had. Okay, enough. Vlogging test begin. Whoa. Okay, so this is the vlogging test of the Sony A6400. We've got the kit lens on it. We're doing 4K 30, and I'm gonna be honest, so when I first heard about the A6400, I was very meh about it. I was like, okay, great, another Sony APS-C camera. You know, Sony's never been like the biggest backers of APS-C, no matter how much they say they are. Like, Sony, if you wanna convince me that you're gonna invest money in APS-C, give me some kind of roadmap, like a lens roadmap, because the Sony APS-C lenses are kinda bleh. They're kinda bleh. Now, Sigma has some fire APS-C Sony lenses, but like, come on, give us something. But the more I use the A6400, the more and more and more, I'm really starting to like it. It ticks an awful lot of my boxes, and as we'll talk here in a little bit, the usability is incredible. Like right now we're doing the vlogging test, which, spoiler alert, I would never really use this as a vlogging camera. It's got some, can you guys see that? It's got some terrible rolling shutter. Like, I don't ever complain about rolling shutter, and the rolling shutter in this camera is terrible and very noticeable. So I don't know that I would use this as a vlogging camera, but for my style of videos, like when we come out and about, like right as you saw me on the GH5 over there a second ago, talking about how we're gonna do this and we're gonna go, like this is like the perfect camera for that. Like, I was considering buying it. If you follow me on my Discord, you'll know that the EOS R has been calling me for this, but I like how small this is. I like how much this is not as expensive as the EOS R, and I like that it just works. And so yeah, okay. I don't wanna like gush too much about it, or you'd think I would be unbiased, but again, I really like this camera. This has been the vlogging test. Woo. The rolling shutter is so bad. But the autofocus is so good, as we saw in the video last week. The autofocus is incredible and might just be worth it by its darn self. Okay, back to the video. And we're back. So like I said outside, I don't really consider the A6400 to be a vlogging camera due to the rolling shutter and the lack of IBIS. I mean, that makes this really hard to recommend for that, because vlogging is all about moving around and capturing life's moments. Do you really want your life's moments to be warped or shaky? I mean, depending on who you are. But like I said in the beginning, for my style of video, this might legitimately be a perfect camera. And I say that is some hyperbole, but it's really good. The video quality is important and all that, but getting it out of the camera efficiently is more important to me than the best image quality in the world, which is, again, why this is so attractive. But how does the A6400 stack up on ease of use? Sony cameras aren't ever really beating down the doors of ease of use, but they aren't the worst either. I do like that this camera uses the newer Sony menu system that's much more clearly laid out and organized. At least this way, if you get lost, you know which major menu tab holds the key you want. So if you're looking for photos, you know where you're at. If you're looking for video, you kind of know where you're at. So the answer should be somewhere you can find. The body of the camera is fine if uninspired. Have you ever used an A6300? Well, then you've basically used an A6400. Congratulations. This is the exact same body, down to the only one customizable button on top, which sucks. But you can set the camera up a few different ways to personalize it to your preferred shooting style. I mean, it's not nearly as customizable as a Panasonic camera, you know, not much is though. One of the newer tricks up the A6400 sleeve is it has tap to focus and tap to track, which while you could do this with the A5100, the A6400 does this so much better. And I'd argue that this is one of the best tap to focus systems and tap to track systems I've ever seen. I mean, once you tap, it's locked on. Even when moving the camera around, it will stay locked onto that target, and even if that target leaves the screen's real estate, when you bring the camera back around, it will, for short periods of time at least, remember what it was focusing on. So you tap, it will not let go, and that's really awesome. And this kind of feature has sorely been missing from Sony's other cameras. It's 2019, all you want to do is tap and focus. Nobody wants to do this anymore. Also, for ease of use, if you use these cameras to live stream as much as I do, the A6400 has much improved heat management. And I've used this thing so far on a stream for 45 minutes without even a little heat management icon turning up. The A6300 used to shut down from heat problems all the time for me. Like, if you ever watched my old live streams, you would know when the video just shut off, it's because the A6300 overheated. Much like the A7 III, you can also power the camera from the USB port while it's in use. Just like on the bigger full-frame camera, this is such an amazing feature and keeps you from having to spend a lot of money on external power options. And every camera needs to have this feature from now on. I have decreed it. Camera companies, get on it. The G9, Panasonic's got it with the G9, Sony the A7 III, everybody else needs to get it. But the real key feature we are all here to find out about when it comes to ease of use is the screen. I, like most other YouTubers, prefer to have some kind of rotating monitor to allow us to judge framing, exposure, monitor audio. We basically need to know what the camera is doing while we're in front of it. And is this my preferred method of flipping screen? No, because it does end up blocking the hot shoe mount on top. Now, this isn't a deal breaker for me, as I can always mount my wireless system somewhere else, but for others that might be a red line. But for me, darn, it just works. However, now we're encroaching on another category, because you can take all the time in the world you want to set up the camera, but after you hit record, it turns into business time. What is business time? Well, this week we're going to be doing something a little bit differently. Business time is how easy is the camera to use after you hit record. So instead of like showing you the camera, I'm going to show you what it's actually like to use after you hit record. So we're currently recording on the A6400. We're a little farther away than we normally would be, because as we said in the vlogging test, Sigma has some amazing lenses for the A6400. This is the 30mm or 50mm equivalent 1.4. So we're gonna give you a shot on how I would normally do an out of studio talking video, but how easy is it to get the image quality I want out of this camera after I hit record. And frankly, it's incredibly easy. I don't know what Sony did with this camera, but it's really good at auto mode. So the camera's currently on, if you can see it, it's currently on aperture priority mode, if you can see it up there. But what I did to make sure that I could dial in the settings that I wanted was I put it in aperture priority mode, I put it at the aperture I wanted, but then I just took the ND filter and I dialed it in until the camera got to 60 shutter speed, which if you're following the 180-degree shutter rule, you want it to be double your frame rate. So I'm doing 4K 30, so that needs to be 60 shutter speed. So I just dialed the ND filter in there and it almost perfectly exposes without having to mess with it. Now that's a big deal. Normally we talk about autofocus, we talk about touch screens, we talk about all that, and that is missing a good usable touch screen for like changing settings in front of it. So that will be a problem we'll talk about here later in the week when we compare it to cameras like the RX100 Mark V and the Canon EOS RP. The Canon EOS RP is one of the best cameras to use after you hit record. But is the A6400 good right now by itself? Yes. The auto exposure and the autofocus by itself, that's it. Like, that's basically all I need for an out of studio camera. Like, this took me 5 seconds to get going and it's now just working. Look, the autofocus is continuing to work. It's continuing to stay properly exposed. If I move back, I'm still in focus. I don't have to worry about it. Like, it's just there and it's just up and it just works. That's what I need in a camera that just works without me having to fiddle with it. And as you can see, hey, we moved up. Hey, I've got another really hot take that I want you to see here. I want to be like, look, this is important. We're at a close-up. That's how important this is. Like, this camera just works. Oh, I love cameras that just work. Like, that makes me so happy. And I've always shied away from Sony cameras a little bit because it's hard to do this. And I know we're way past what we normally talk about with business time, but I'm so impressed with this, and it's worth it to lose some of you to the retention of me just being excited, because this camera just works. The rolling shutter is atrocious. If somebody does not tell you that, they're trying to sell you one. The rolling shutter on this camera is terrible, but if you're not like jumping around everywhere, it's totally usable. And I frankly, this is still a loaner. Remember that this camera is a loaner. I didn't pay for this one, but the lenses, I bought those Sigma lenses because I fully plan on buying one of these when I send it back, because it's just so good. Okay, way too long later, back to the video. Back again. Man, it was gross outside there. Since business time took much longer than normal, I'm gonna go over the rest rather quickly. But just because we're in a hurry doesn't mean we're gonna skip over something almost as important as ease of use, and that's what does the ecosystem / upgrade path look like. A camera body only gets you so far. You will need to get some kind of lenses to be a system to, be worth buying. And this is kind of the weakest link for the A6400, in my opinion. Sony continues to claim that they are invested in APS-C and they want to blow our minds. Well, Sony, show me a lens roadmap or something. I mean, you can use the full frame E-mount lenses on here with the equivalent crop, so it's not all doom and gloom. I would love to know what's on the horizon because the current crop of APS-C Sony native lenses are pretty meh. They're not great. There is a notable exception, and that's the trinity of Sigma prime lenses. Sigma has released a full frame equivalent 24, 50, and 85 set of lenses for the Sony APS-C cameras that are straight up some of the best lenses on the market. I mean, I bought the whole set to use for this camera. Here's the 16mm, which is the 24 equivalent. Here's the 56, which is the 85, and the 30mm or the 50 equivalent is what's on the camera right now. They are fantastic with great image quality, super sharp, and a blisteringly fast 1.4 aperture. So if you want these lenses, then the A6400 has support you need. If you want fast zooms, then you'll have to buy the full frame ones, and those are expensive. Like, way more expensive than this camera. But to sum it up, so what, right? So to rehash what we said in the beginning of the video, I'm darn impressed with the A6400. And honestly, I did not expect to be. I thought this was gonna be a meh APS-C camera from a company that doesn't even really have its heart in this sensor size. The A6500 is one of my least favorite cameras of all time, so I was just like, yeah, whatever. Whatever. But dang it, Sony, you basically made exactly what I wanted in a camera. Small-bodied, great autofocus, A7 III colors, flip screen, awesome preamps, and without the overheating I've come to dread. Frankly, I really just like the A6400, and this is absolutely gonna replace my X-T3 and Z6 as my out and about camera. It just works, and it works darn well, and for me, that's what's most important. Thanks for watching.